The ongoing war in Ukraine has far-reaching consequences, not only for Ukraine but for the entire European continent. As the conflict drags on, Europe is facing a series of economic, social, and political challenges that are becoming more pronounced each day. From soaring energy prices to rising unemployment and political instability, the impact of the Ukraine war is taking a heavy toll. In this video, we will explore the 10 most significant effects of the war that are slowly but surely damaging Europe, affecting everything from its economy to its security and social fabric. Let's dive into these critical issues one by one. Number 1. Energy crisis and rising prices. Since the outbreak of the Ukraine war, Europe has been grappling with a severe energy crisis. Much of Europe's energy needs were previously met by Russian oil and gas, but with sanctions imposed on Russia, this supply has been heavily disrupted. As a result, energy prices have soared, affecting both consumers and industries alike. In response, European nations are exploring alternative energy sources like renewables, coal, and even nuclear power, although these come with environmental and economic costs. Energy-intensive industries are cutting back production or even closing down, leading to layoffs and a slowdown in economic growth. Households are facing skyrocketing bills, making it difficult for the average person to afford basic utilities. The energy crisis is not only a financial burden but also a strain on the social fabric, as citizens are increasingly frustrated with the lack of affordable energy. Number 2. Inflation and increased cost of living. The ripple effects of the energy crisis have triggered a sharp rise in inflation across Europe. The cost of essentials, including food, fuel, and household goods, has skyrocketed, pushing many people into financial hardship. Items like bread, milk, and meat have become significantly more expensive, putting immense pressure on families, particularly those with lower incomes. Inflation is eroding the purchasing power of consumers, making it harder for them to maintain their standard of living. Governments are struggling to manage inflation through interest rate hikes and monetary policies, but these measures have been slow to show results. As a result, there's a growing sense of dissatisfaction among the public, and many are calling for government intervention to ease the burden on the average citizen. Number 3. Reduced business activity and rising unemployment. With energy costs soaring and overall economic instability increasing, many businesses in Europe have been forced to cut back or even close down. Small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, are particularly vulnerable as they struggle to absorb the rising costs of production and transportation. Many companies have been laying off workers or reducing their hours, leading to a rise in unemployment. This is having a particularly severe impact on younger generations and migrants who already face challenges entering the job market. The increase in unemployment is putting additional strain on social welfare programs, and governments are finding it difficult to manage the growing numbers of jobless individuals. This economic downturn is causing widespread frustration and anxiety, and recovery seems far off for many European nations. Number 4. Refugee crisis and resource strain. The war in Ukraine has triggered a massive wave of refugees seeking safety in neighboring European countries. While many nations have opened their doors to those fleeing the conflict, the rapid influx of refugees has strained public services such as housing, healthcare, and education. These countries are struggling to provide adequate support to the growing number of people in need, creating a sense of competition for limited resources. Local populations are beginning to feel the strain as public services become overwhelmed, and there is growing resentment in some areas towards the influx of refugees. Social tensions are rising as the refugee crisis, combined with the economic struggles many Europeans are facing, creates an atmosphere of unease and frustration. Number 5. Impact of sanctions on Russia and economic backlash. The sanctions imposed on Russia by European nations have been a key part of the strategy to pressure Russia into ending the conflict. However, these sanctions have also led to significant economic repercussions for Europe itself. Many industries in Europe relied on Russian resources, including gas, oil, and raw materials, and the loss of these imports has disrupted supply chains and increased costs. Industries like construction, automotive, and agriculture are facing higher operational costs and reduced productivity. Substituting Russian materials is both costly and time-consuming, and this has put European businesses at a competitive disadvantage globally. While the sanctions aim to weaken Russia's economy, the damage to Europe's own economy has been a significant consequence of this strategy. Number 6. Increased defense spending and military buildup. In response to the war in Ukraine, European countries have dramatically increased their defense spending. Many nations, particularly NATO members, are ramping up their military budgets to ensure their readiness in case the conflict spreads or spills over into other regions. This increased defense spending is seen as necessary to secure the continent, but it comes at the cost of other important public services. With funds being diverted from social programs like healthcare, education, and infrastructure, many Europeans are questioning whether the defense budget is worth the sacrifice. Additionally, the military buildup has raised concerns about the potential for an arms race and long-term instability as tensions continue to rise across Europe. Number 7. Political instability and public discontent. The war in Ukraine has sparked political debates across Europe, with different governments adopting varying stances on how to deal with the crisis. Some countries, particularly those in Eastern Europe, have been more vocal in their support for Ukraine, while others have been more cautious, calling for diplomatic solutions. These differences in approach have caused political instability in some European nations, with governments struggling to find consensus on how best to handle the situation. Public discontent is also on the rise, as citizens become increasingly frustrated with the government's handling of the crisis and its impact on their daily lives. The growing divide between pro- and anti-war factions is creating a political climate of uncertainty and division. Number 8. Environmental concerns and climate setbacks. As Europe seeks to reduce its reliance on Russian energy, some countries are turning to alternative sources like coal and nuclear power. These choices have raised significant environmental concerns, particularly regarding the increase in carbon emissions and pollution. The renewed use of coal contradicts Europe's previous commitments to achieving carbon neutrality and tackling climate change. Environmental activists are voicing their opposition, arguing that the short-term energy solutions are doing more harm than good in the long run. The shift in energy policies is creating a delicate balance between meeting immediate energy needs and adhering to long-term environmental goals. Number 9. Social tensions and rise of far-right movements. The economic struggles and migration issues stemming from the Ukraine war have contributed to the rise of far-right movements in Europe. Many citizens, particularly those affected by inflation and unemployment, are blaming refugees and migrants for their hardships, fueling anti-immigrant sentiment. Right-wing political parties are exploiting these sentiments, gaining traction by promising to address the concerns of the disenfranchised. This rise in far-right extremism is further dividing European societies, with some people advocating for nationalism and others pushing for greater inclusion and solidarity. The polarization of political ideologies is undermining Europe's traditionally progressive values, making it harder to achieve unity in the face of ongoing challenges. Number 10. Internal disagreements within the European Union. The war in Ukraine has exposed deep divisions within the European Union, EU, itself. Member states have differing views on how to approach the conflict, and these differences are hindering the EU's ability to present a united front. Some countries, particularly those closest to Russia, advocate for harsher sanctions and stronger support for Ukraine, while others call for diplomacy and caution. This internal discord is creating friction within the EU and making it difficult for the organization to reach consensus on key issues. The divisions are also affecting the EU's long-term stability, as members question the effectiveness of the Union in addressing the challenges posed by the war and its aftermath.